Okay, here we go. Hello, Team Healthy. I'm hoping you're having a good Wednesday or Thursday or Monday or whatever time it is that you're watching. Remember, we have this that goes on live. So those of you who are watching on delay, if you can, we'd love to have you live here. It's 11 o'clock Central Time U.S. If you can't, I get it. And if that's the case, then that's why we have it on tape. Okay, I just want to throw something at you while we're still waiting for people to jump in. Last week, I asked you to. We hadn't done this in a while. I asked you to let me know where you're coming from, where you live, and I just wanted to give you an idea. Now, the United States is covered. About 60%, 59, 60% of our audience is from the United States, and then the rest is international. So I want to kind of give you an idea of where we're reaching out just with our videos and all here. Just in this last week, we've heard from people from Egypt, Croatia, France, New Zealand, Australia, Poland, England, Scotland, Wales, Greece, Netherlands, Lebanon, Ireland, Liechtenstein, Germany, Belgium, Argentina, Russia, Austria, South Africa, Brazil, Kenya, Sweden, Turkey, Canada, and then, of course, the U.S. and especially Pennsylvania, where Aaron lives. How about that, Aaron? You got a special mention. So, and then all over the United States, of course, and even from the country of California. So I'm so pleased that you're here with me and that you encourage each other. There's Denmark. I don't know if I got that one in on this list. Um, it really is a cool thing for us to be able to encourage each other no matter where we are. Human nature is such that we're all different, but we can each have some similarities too. So I so appreciate our Team Healthy and how broadly it goes, and the fact that you all take it upon yourselves to encourage one another. Real quick, you've probably seen by now that beginning on February the 13th, we're going to be having our next webinar, and it's about the covert narcissist and post traumatic stress. So keep your eye out for information on that. Um, okay, today, I like to kind of line up some of the questions here underneath the theme. And today I'm talking about twisted feelings that come along with you trying to come to terms with the narcissist. One of the things a narcissist does not like is your clarity. Okay. They don't like it for you to say, well, I've got a good idea about who I am and where I'm headed and what I stand for. They want you to stay in a position of confusion. And so, whenever you share your thoughts, or even if you don't share your thoughts and feelings, they're going to be acting in such a way to twist you around like a pretzel so that you can have uncertainty and you can have confusion regarding who you are and where you're going and what's appropriate versus what's not appropriate. And we're going to see if we can do something about that. Okay. Now, I've got multiple questions here, and frankly, I've got some pretty strong loaded questions, and so I want to get right into it. Now, the first three questions that I'm going to ask here today, I've lined them up specifically in this order because it kind of shows some of what the progression is. Okay, when it comes to how these individuals can twist you around. The first question has to do with the subject of forgiveness. All right. Before we even go into the question, how many of you have been in a situation where that narcissist has truly done something inappropriate and then they remind you, well, you're supposed to forgive me? Well, frankly, I'm one of these that says, all right, I agree. Forgiveness is a good thing, but not in the way the narcissist wants you to think of it. So we're going to go through this. First person just simply says, how do you forgive a narcissist without letting your guard down? Now, the very simple nature of this question tells us that this individual has been challenged on the whole topic of forgiveness. The implication when they say, "How do I forgive without letting my guard down?" The implication is, wrongly, I might add, if you forgive, you're just supposed to become super vulnerable all over again, go ahead and get tied right back into that narcissistic person and let them be your pal, your buddy, your running mate, or whatever it might be. And let's just kind of try to get back and make things as clean and friendly and normal as we possibly can. That's not necessarily something that is necessary that we need to go into. Yes, when you talk about a narcissistic individual doing something that's quite egregious, forgiveness is a good thing. And first, let's look at forgiveness as being an accounting word. Okay, if I have a debt and that debt is listed here on my ledger, and it's clear that the person who owes the debt to me doesn't have the resources to pay me back, then at some point I may just write that off and forgive the debt. Technically, that's what we're talking about when we talk about forgiveness. We're talking about dropping the requirement for some form of payment from that person back to you. For example, um, there are times, let's say a person can scream at you and unload really unhealthy anger. Well, at some point, you want to forgive in the sense that it happened and I don't want to hold on to a grudge. Or let's say it's something really harsh, like they had an extramarital affair, or you found out that there was a lot of lying or doing damage toward about you behind your back toward other individuals. I mean, there's so many possibilities. At some point, it may be that you'll conclude there's not a lot that that person can do to make restitution, and so it's like I'm just going to let go. I'm going to release it. In fact, I have a video that's one of my largest ones that's called the "I Release You" approach towards response to narcissism, or something like that. It's worth looking into. When you forgive, though, forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to forget what you feel. It doesn't mean that you have to deny your own hurt or your anger or your disillusionment. You can still have those emotions. I've had plenty of cases where an individual has been hurt by a very narcissistic person, and they can still come back, whether it's a week later, or a month later, or a couple of years later, and say, I'm still struggling with my feelings on that. And the narcissist can come and say, well, you said you forgave me. And the implication is quit feeling what you feel. And that's how they twist you around. It's like they want to go ahead and get that ledger clean and all of that. And then they want you to have wonderful feelings. But you can still have the feelings that you have with the understanding. I know you can't make restitution, but I feel what I feel. And also, forgiveness does not preclude boundaries. Whenever we have boundaries, for example, somebody may have wronged me greatly, and it's like, I don't want to hold on to the bitterness or to the anger that could go along with it, at least to its farthest extreme. But I don't want to have that person over for dinner either. Okay. And there are times when you establish a boundary, or I'm not going to share personal things with that person as they now suggest that I'm supposed to. And so let's remember what forgiveness is and is not. The narcissist wants a get out of jail free card, and they can take it too far. But then what that does is it kind of creates that twisted kind of feeling. Now, let's take it a little bit further with our next question. This next person says, what's the difference between being brainwashed and being gaslighted? I'm so confused. And then that person says, I feel like I'm getting lost. Okay. Um, Now, actually, there's a great deal of overlap between brainwashing and gaslighting. A little bit of a distinction, but they can have the same net effect, and basically they want to negate you when that happens. When we talk about somebody brainwashing, it can actually be a very strong proactive way of trying to persuade you that what you used to think was true really is not, and that you need to filter your thoughts through that narcissistic individual. And so, if you say something like, "Well, my political beliefs are this, or my religious persuasions are this, or my opinion about this family is this," I mean, pick a loaded topic, and that narcissistic person will say, well, I've been around the block a lot, and I really know what's going on here. So let me tell you what it needs to be. And they can come on very strong in giving you instruction. They can be very directive in saying, here's how you need to think. These are the priorities, these are the behaviors, and this is why. And so they have this whole ritual of things that they try to make you believe and understand. Of course, it's very self serving for the narcissist. That's the brainwashing, because when you are exposed to it over and over and over, it whittles away at your sense of resolve. When we talk about gaslighting, it may not be quite as proactive, or let's say obvious in the way that it comes through. It can be proactive. And by gaslighting, we're talking about trying to generate confusion with regard to what you perceive and what you think is wise. For example, if you were to say something like, I did such and such yesterday on this project, and I'm really hoping we're going to get a good outcome. And the narcissist might say, are you sure that was the right decision? And so they may not be giving you the instruction, but what they're doing is they're wanting to create confusion. Or if you say, well, I had this experience with this person and it didn't work out well. And the gaslighting person can say something like, well, all I know is anytime I've been around that person, they've been solid gold. So I'm not real sure where you're coming from. And so it's a little bit of a more nuanced, if you will, approach. But brainwashing, gaslighting, the bottom line is don't think what you think. Don't feel what you feel. Just go ahead and filter it through me. And so they're first cousins to one another. They have a little bit of a nuance or a little bit of a distinction. So know that. Now, let's go back and we're going to tie this into something of the forgiveness, but of it with a little bit different twist. My third question here today. This person goes back to their teachings as a kid, and this person says, I was always taught to apologize. So I would finally just break down just to make things work. I didn't even have a clue what I was apologizing for. So now we have a situation where this individual made an independent decision. uh, and who knows how they handle their schedule or how they prioritize certain things in their life or opinions they have. And the narcissist, constantly being the victim, keeping in mind, might say something like, do you realize how that hurts my feelings? Do you realize how that really messes things up for me? Do you understand that that's something that's very offensive? You need to apologize to me. And so, just like that forgiveness question, it's like, well, when am I supposed to forgive, or what does it mean? And then, what about an apology? Am I being brainwashed? Am I being gaslit? And you can see through these questions that narcissists like, I don't particularly care what the topic is, as long as I can keep you twisted. And so, when that person comes along and says you need to apologize, the gaslighting is, you're an ingrate, aren't you? Now, it's not necessarily said, but the implication is there. Or the gaslighting might be, you weren't being very compliant with what I say you ought to do. Let me explain to you again what the rules are around here. And then we go into the brainwashing. And then all of this common sense that you can have about establishing boundaries and being true to yourself, it becomes garbled, and you find yourself having a lot of strain and difficulty thinking, well, who am I supposed to believe? Now, one of the things that that I really want you to do as you answer that question is, well, at some point you need to consult yourself. What do I think? And it doesn't mean you're going to be right 100% of the time, but neither is that narcissistic person who has a strong self-serving agenda. At some point, when you have these individuals who have the goal of keeping you twisted and keeping you confused or causing you to doubt, at some point you want to pull back and think, wait a minute, who am I dealing with here? Am I dealing with someone who has the real strong positive intention of making life really good between myself and that person? And when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's like, no, it's a one-way street. When you and I are engaging with each other, I want it to go well for me, and they don't really care that much about what happens to you. And so this person says, I was always told that I was supposed to apologize. Well, apologies are good when necessary. But if in your mind you think, well, I didn't do anything wrong, I just had a preference, or I made an executive decision, or I followed through on something that was important to me, and that other person says, you owe me an apology. Like, yeah, I know you think I owe you a whole lot, but in this case, I really don't. Just hold your ground. Be open to apologies, be open to forgiveness, be open to boundaries. But then when they come along and turn it into an obligation, a duty, a requirement, You're gonna get in trouble if you don't do that. It's like, those are red flags, and I'm not gonna buy into that. Okay, so you can see just in these first questions that we have that narcissists are constantly looking for that opening where it's like, how can I get you to minimize yourself? That way I can come in and maximize myself. That's how they think. They want to stay in that superior position over you. Yeah, this next question. Okay, I know that a high percentage of you are sometimes in the position that you are because you're a little bit too nice. I like nice. Whenever somebody says, "Well, you're just too nice," it's like, well, nice is good until the narcissist shows up and says, well, let me see if I can work this into my favor. Sometimes you wonder, well, maybe if I just put a little honey and sugar on my words and in the way that I treat that person, then we could actually be okay. And if you want to try to, dress things up in a pleasing kind of way, I don't have a problem with that up to a point. Okay. But this person asked, what if someone created a safe place for the narcissist to share their feelings and emotions so they can learn to fill their needs from within rather than from the outside? I think that's great when we're talking about reasonable people. Now, basically, what I'm actually hearing, reading between the lines with this question is, do you think it's possible for me to set up the right scenario for that narcissistic person to change and be a good person? And again, I'm all for right scenarios, but and being safe is an admirable kind of thing. But I think that the person that's asking this question needs to ask of themselves, am I just sitting on top of this white horse with my rescue mentality, my hero mindset fully intact? Am I trying to make this something to where I don't have to deal with all the garbage? What if I can create a wonderful kind of atmosphere for that person and then they can be safe, they can start being vulnerable and being open with me? Maybe we can get somewhere. With normal people, yes. Unfortunately, there are many times when a narcissist will interpret your helpfulness or your kindness or your open mindedness as an inroad. And it's so sad to have to think like that. It's like, oh, so you're over there, you're kind of drawing upon some of those softer kind of characteristics. I can make that work for me. And unfortunately, if you're not terribly inclined to think like a narcissist, you can just play right in. It's like, I'm just trying to be sweet. I'm trying to be nice. Now, I do think that it's good to establish your willingness and your fairness. You don't want to just turn into such a cynic or such a jaded kind of person that you just go around with a hard attitude against anybody and everybody. But I think we also need to think, well, ultimately, it's not your responsibility to make the narcissist feel comfortable enough to change. I mean, yes, you want to be available if the possibility is there, but it's going to have to come from within the narcissist. If they come to you and say, I've been doing a lot of soul searching, I've been reading books, or I've been going to counseling, or I've been talking to some friends, or watching YouTube videos, and I'm kind of in a place where I know that something very different needs to happen. I'll listen. And I want to be open, and I want to be the kind of person that's safe. And I've had many situations throughout my entire adult years, whether it's in a personal level or on a professional level, where it's like, okay, that person is coming in and they're saying the right things. And if it's going to happen, that it needs to be with somebody who they consider to be an open and safe individual, I'm all for that. But then when it becomes obvious that, after the crisis is over and they start reverting back to the old ways, or then they start thinking or implying, well, now that I've been a lot nicer, you owe me, don't you? Sometimes if you're strongly narcissistic, those characteristics are just going to keep showing up. They can't stop themselves. And so, yes, be a safe person. I'm going to be doing a video on that. It's on my list. Let me show you here. This is just part of my list. I got all these different things here that I write down. So it's on the list, and I am going to be doing something on that. But let's just make sure that you understand that it's a good thing, but narcissists are exploiters and they're users, and they're constantly looking for that inroad. And so just be aware of what you're dealing with. Okay. So is it good to say you want to be safe? Yeah, but don't try to be a hero either, because that's going to get you in trouble just about every single time. All right. I wonder if you all, excuse me, will have the same reaction that I had when I first read this one. The next question, this person says, I know a person who displays all the narcissistic traits. Okay. Well, note that. Uh, Pay attention to what you're observing. When I indirectly hinted to this observation, they told me that they suffer from generalized anxiety disorder. What's the difference? So you, excuse me, I got a little something in my throat. So you have a person that seems highly narcissistic. And when you say all the narcissistic traits, let's kind of go back with our little primer. When we talk about narcissism, it's a cluster of, or it's collection of a number of ingredients like high need for control and selfishness and manipulation and exploitation, the need to be superior, pathologically defensive, offering alternate reality. In other words, you can't teach them anything because they already know what their version of truth is. All of that is narcissism. So so you say something like, "Hey, I noticed that there's a problem here," and they'll say, "Yeah, sometimes I have anxiety, and I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder." Um, Generalized anxiety disorder it's a mood disorder. Narcissism is a character disorder. When we talk about a mood disorder, we're talking about emotional responses to suffering or unusual circumstances or unwanted scenarios. And there are times when it's normal to say this creates tension or this creates anxiety or this creates confusion in me. And so there are times when people can have so much disarray in their life that they actually develop some anxiety and depression. And of course, guys like me, back when I was in my practice, we would work things through and go through coping skills, etc. Uh, Quick aside, whenever somebody would come in with anxiety, there would be three things that I would watch for. One is control, fear, and then anger. Um, the anxious person is inevitably feels like they're controlled. They have to be very guarded and calculated in how they present themselves. Fear, do I trust this person? I'm not sure. Anger, there can be an undertow of irritability and agitation that's generated, and so that's part of the mood. When we talk though about a character disorder, which narcissism comes up under, basically a character disorder is just how you do life in general. So it's not so much situationally driven as it is, it's just who they are from the inside out. And so is narcissism and generalized anxiety, are they the same thing? The answer is, oh, they're very, very different. And they're in very different categories. And so, yeah, this person says, I just indirectly hinted this observation. And then it goes on to say, this person refuses to talk with me about it and told me that I'm mentally ill. I'm so confused. Okay, so this individual tried to explain, hey, there's some things here that are of concern. And that individual says, well, I just have generalized anxiety. And then apparently there was some discussion about that. And so the individual in question says, well, bottom line is, I think you're mentally ill. Okay, that's strong. And rather than saying, well, what are you picking up on? Or talk with me about it. Or, yes, I know that I do have some strains, and sharing it with you. No, all they do is they take the victim's role. They go into the blame shifting. They flip it around. It's what I refer to as their boomerang communication. And so to me, you're picking up on it pretty accurately. It's like what you're talking about probably is much deeper than just a mood disorder. Not that, well, we want to minimize mood disorders. So just know the difference between mood disorder and character disorder. Two very different kinds of things. Uh, Okay, this next one, and this is one of the classic ones. This kind of goes into a classic space. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to do the things that are good, but even when I'm trying to be at my best, the narcissist can still twist it around and make me feel confused. So that's kind of a lead in here. This person asked the question, Dr. C, could you explain whether it's good to thank a narcissist for something or compliment him on anything? Okay. So is it okay to say thank you or pay a compliment? It seems to me that when I do this with my husband, it feeds his narcissistic need. He adds more to the list of what he's done and then goes on about how much it cost him and expects payback as if I owe him for anything good that he's done. I don't want to become an ungrateful wife. So when someone does a kind thing, I just say thank you. So here the question is it okay to say thank you to a narcissist? And my response is, I'm glad you think that way. Good. I think it's good that you're the kind of person that can say, if something goes well, I'd like to give credit where credit's due. And if I'm appreciative, I like to name it and say, here are the things that I like. And don't stop being a courteous or conscientious kind of person. Now, having said that, let's keep in mind that narcissists are constantly on the take. You remember our term narcissistic supply? Narcissists are thinking, what are you going to give me that makes me feel good about who I am? That they're terribly insecure and they need lots of positive reinforcement. And so when you come along and say, well, the way you worked with me on that project, that really worked out well. It's like, yeah, it really did, didn't it? Of course, that's me. And so you begin to pick up on an attitude of not just entitlement, but you notice how special I am, just like I notice how special I am. Should you keep passing along compliments or saying things that you're grateful about? My thing is, on one hand, I don't think you want to just push this so much that you wind up feeding their deeply insecure ego needs. Stay who you are, but also know who your audience is, and make sure that you have a differentiation. There's a strong implication that when she says, I don't want to become an ungrateful wife, the strong implication is, well, I have to, stay nice and be friendly and kind because I don't want him to have the wrong impression of me. It's like, you know what? Let him have whatever impression he wants to have. If you've got good character and if he doesn't know how to interpret it correctly, and if he says, well, I want more, that's on him. Be good, be decent, DRC, dignity, respect, and civility, but then keep your boundaries too, and know who you're dealing with, and then don't allow that person to use your kindness and your goodness as an opportunity to then pull you into behaviors or priorities that you don't agree with. So maintain your decency, but understand you're still dealing with an alligator. You know the story of the alligator and the rabbit. And I have one of my oldest videos that you're on YouTube is the alligator and the rabbit. It's a takeoff on various variations of that same story. An alligator is just going to be an alligator, and so try to remember that. Okay, you're being gaslit when you are thankful, and then the implication is, but you need to do more. It's like, no, you don't. Be who you are, and just realize it's a game to them. Okay. Okay. Now, another question. A while back, my wife was complaining that I'm not honest enough with her and that I hide my true feelings. So, in a moment of vulnerability, I shared with her the way she treats me is extremely hurtful to the point to where it feels abusive. Ever since then, she's held this over my head and makes me feel guilty for saying that. She says things like, I feel like anything I say to you is going to be labeled as abusive, so I don't want to say anything at all. What do I do with this feeling? You hear Gus in the background there. Okay, so the wife actually says to the husband, I want you to be vulnerable with me. Talk with me about what you really feel because we need to have that kind of exchange between the two of us. And so this husband later on says, well, we had that conversation and I have been sitting on a lot of these feelings. And so he makes the attempt to say, I was hurt because there was A, B, and C that happened. It felt very insensitive to the point of abusive. And since you asked me to talk, then I think we need to talk about that. And then the narcissistic apparently wife says, well, I was just kidding. I didn't want you to really tell me about stuff like that. I mean, if you're going to confront me, yeah, it's okay to say, the toast was a little burnt or you were 3 minutes late, but I wasn't talking about, hard stuff. And it shows the lack of sincerity that these individuals have. Unfortunately, there can be times when they can come along and actually say the right things for a while, and it seems sincere in the moment, but that's part of them twisting you around. That's part of the gaslighting. They create an atmosphere where up appears to be down and good seems to be, or bad seems to be good. And you walk away thinking, I don't know what's there. And so that being the case, um, remind yourself when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're dealing with somebody who does not like vulnerability. They like you to be vulnerable. And so when they give you the invitation, we need to be more vulnerable. What they like is for you to say, I'm struggling or I didn't handle that well. So they can come in and save the day or tell you what to do. But it's like, well, wait a minute, when you have a vulnerability and it implies maybe that I perhaps need to make some adjustment. I wasn't talking about that kind of vulnerability because then it would cause them to have to introspect and look at who they are and what they bring to the equation, and that just doesn't fit with that pattern. So, to that wife who then turned around and got angry at you because you did try to confront her on something. It's like, well, there you have it. And, nice try, but it didn't work. You showed your colors. Keep that in mind. Okay. Um, all right. Now, another, and this goes into the I feel so twisted kind of mode. This person asked, how does one respond to a narcissist without exhibiting narcissistic traits yourself? Okay. Narcissists, and this person goes on to say, narcissists tend to fault find. But if we look for narcissistic responses from narcissists, aren't we fault finding? Narcissists tend to use confirmation bias to justify their egocentric actions and responses. But aren't we doing the same if we paint others as toxic narcissists? Okay. Um, there's a cynicism that's here. The implication is we're not allowed to use a word like narcissism, or we're not allowed to use words like dysfunctional or painful or problematic. That was a problematic situation. The implication with this question is, well, if I point out to a narcissist that that was a problematic situation, or I feel pain, or that didn't work well for me, then maybe I'm being narcissistic, because narcissists indeed will come at you with lots of criticism and bossiness and control and all of that. And so the question is, well, am I doing the same thing in reverse? First and foremost, let's keep in mind that we want to zero in on a person's intent. It's all about intent. When narcissists come at you with their criticisms, they have the intent of trying to force you to conform. I have a strong agenda, and it's your job to figure out what my agenda is, and then fulfill whatever requirements that implies. And if you can't remember, I'm more than willing to tell you what the agenda is yet again and keep you in line. And then, in addition, and of course, you can see that a narcissist intent is very different from a healthy person. If a healthy individual is confronting or pointing something out, their intent is love and goodness. Back when I was doing my anger workshops, I would talk about how do you know if assertiveness is really that, or if it's just veiled aggression, well, which is a very similar concept that this person is asking about, and it comes down to, do I honestly believe that I have loving or constructive intentions, and I'm wanting to speak in such a way where we all benefit by getting this topic out in the open? When that's the case, then we're in good shape. In addition, then notice tone of voice. When narcissists try to provide feedback, typically the tone of voice is condescending or it's disapproving. And so healthy individuals can also confront, but there's not that condescension that's there. There can be a reasonableness, there can be a sense of fair play that comes through. It's part of the nonverbal communication. And so if you have good intent and if your method of communicating is clean, then that's not the same as being narcissistic. Narcissism isn't the same as disagreeing. Narcissism isn't the same as saying, I don't like what you think. Narcissism is all about self absorption, being highly controlling, having no empathy. And so you want to put your behaviors into that broader context. And if you honestly know that you are truly looking for restoration as opposed to domination, then you're okay. And so it's okay to confront. Sometimes it's necessary to confront. And so don't let a narcissist twist you around saying, well, you talking about narcissists being critical. Look at you. And it's a different kind of bird. So just be honest with yourself about what your intent is and what your basic methodology is. Okay, now I want to see if you can pick up on some red flags in this one. As I was reading through this, it's like, oh boy, tons of red flags. Have you ever engaged with a narcissist who wants to change or says they want to change? And that's the gist. It's this person goes into a bit of detail, but let's go through it. This person asks, do you know of any narcissists who have made a change that actually made any difference? My husband is a covert narcissist, and he went to violence intervention classes, an alternative to going to jail. Okay, I guess that's motivation. He says he made a change in his attitude. It was a 12-step type program, and he was supposed to apologize to people he had hurt. He told me that he had changed and he realized that he had not acted right for 34 years and he was sorry. And then this person goes on to say he couldn't elaborate on it anymore than except that I should forgive him because he didn't know that he had been acting wrong. Many things were going through my mind to say, but finally I said to him, why did you do it? I was so unhappy. And his answer was, I didn't know you were unhappy. Okay, so here you have this person, and I don't know what it was. I'm guessing it was probably some sort of domestic violence because he was threatened with jail time, and so he goes to here violence intervention classes. So yeah, must have been something like that. And so this person goes into these 12-step type program, which I'm all for. I think it's great to have that kind of accountability, and they can teach you a lot when you get into the right groups there. Um, but you get the idea that he's doing what he's supposed to do because that's the steps that were laid out for him, not necessarily that it was coming from a heart place. You understand the difference? Um, it's the old I'm standing up on the outside, I'm still sitting down on the inside. Um, he says, I'm sorry. But then, of course, step 4 says that you're supposed to, go back and make amends and say you're sorry and all. And so was he just fulfilling what the step said, or did he really mean it? When she tries to elaborate and say, well, what are you sorry for? Or let's talk about what that means. It's like, don't ask hard questions like that. And so he says all he can say is, well, I didn't know what I was doing was wrong. Okay, so if this guy is trying to stay out of jail and going to violence, anger management classes, and he looks back and says, well, I just didn't know it was wrong. Okay, I've got a response to that, and it's the response is bull corn. Seriously, you didn't know it was wrong to do whatever it is that you were doing that landed you in violence classes. That doesn't smack as a very sincere kind of response at all. And then when she asked, well, why did you do it? His response, the best he can come up with, was, I didn't know you were unhappy. I'm guessing that's not accurate either. So when this person says, "Well, I've changed," and I've spoken with many people who have been in a real crisis situation. In this guy's case, it may have been that he was arrested, or other people they were busted for an affair, or other individuals, they were caught cheating with money, or they were just caught cheating with, caught telling lies. Who knows what it is? Well, I've changed. Okay, well, then let's see what time shows. And if there's empathy, for example, if he says, "I know that I've hurt you, and I'd like to know more fully about what your thoughts and feelings are there." Okay, that's good. If the person names it, here's what I did specifically when on this date when I did this activity and I had this intent. That's what I know that needs to be different. And I had all these other kind of times. If they're very particular and very specific, that impresses me. If they drop any entitlement. For example, in this guy's case, the implication is, well, I've gone to my group and I sat down and said, I'm sorry. Now, what are you going to do for me? That's their entitlement. You owe it to me now to drop all charges, so to speak. But if they say, the bottom line is, I did something really wrong and I don't have any inherent right to ask you to have any kind of response other than what you feel. And so if you know that they're coming with a non-control, non-entitled attitude, that's good. Also, if they have patience, that's good. In other words, I know this can take a long time to unravel. When they don't have all of that, then to me, this change that we're talking about is a little more than fool's gold. We need to know that there are particulars, specifics, naming it, being empathetic, being solicitous of input from you, making adjustments to coordinate much better and harmonize. And I'm not really hearing it in this lady's question. Okay. So trust your gut when you say this just doesn't feel right. Okay. All right. Now, this is a little bit of a different one. This person says, my wife has a heart of gold. That's really nice to be able to say that about your wife. But she's treated horribly by her narcissistic sister and mother. She has such a hard time letting them go because they're family. She feels she's the reason they hate her. Okay. Now, that one really kind of gets the hair on my back standing up. Why do they hate me? And what I would say to this woman is drop the pronoun, me. Why do they hate me? Just drop that. Why do they hate? That's a more accurate question. You happen to be a player on the stage and they're unfolding or unfurling all of their garbage onto you, but it doesn't mean that you're the cause. You're the recipient. There are plenty of people, and I could just, if I had perfect recall with history and well-known individuals who are on the receiving end of very negative treatment, but they were very decent people. And so when you say, well, why did they hate that person? The answer is because they hate. You just happen to be in their way, and you just happen to be the one that was blocking their ambitions in the moment. And so try to remember you're not the issue. Narcissists use a lot of projection. They like to see in you what they won't come to terms with inside themselves, and so kind of going hand in hand. Then they're constantly the victim. Look what you've done to make my life miserable, and I'm sure that this woman has had plenty of that from her mother and her sister. And at some point, when it's like, I'm doing the best I can to be kind and to be helpful and to be flexible. But when it all comes down to the fact that I'm defective and they're better than me, and they continue to act insulting or condescending, at some point it's like, okay, I may be a slow learner, but I am learning. And if that's the way you want to treat me, then certainly knock yourself out. You can be that way, but I choose not to participate. And so, to this husband who's asking about this, it might be that he'll need to say, well, when we have that invitation to go to their house for dinner or whatever it might be, if you want to go, that's certainly your prerogative. But I feel so much hurt on your behalf, and I feel so much pain on your behalf that I don't know that I want to participate in that, because I care about you enough, and I love you enough to where if I had my preference, I would say, why don't we stay away from people that are going to be damaging? And so at least give her that kind of message. Okay. Okay. One last question. And this comes from our one of our listeners in Poland. This says, how do I find out who I am after being in a narcissistic relationship. And I thought I'd end on this one. You know, narcissists want to twist you around. They want to make you feel confused. They want to declare your goodness as bad and their bad as good. So when this person says, how do I get back to being who I am after I've been brainwashed and gaslit by these narcissists? There's an exercise that I like to encourage people to do. One is sit down with a pad and pencil or paper and write down a list of the top characteristics that you would like to have in your personality. And when I say a list, I don't mean three, I mean 15 or 20. And just come up with a really solid list. I want to have kindness. I want to have firmness. I want to have respect. I want to be a good listener. I want to be, whatever it might be. And then the next question is write down at least a half a dozen or so of the most common scenarios when you're not likely to be that kind of person. Okay. And so, in other words, I want to be patient. But then a scenario might be, well, that person argues with me and criticizes, and before you know it, I'm impatient and I'm irritable. Okay, that's a scenario. The third part of the exercise is can you rehearse in advance what your healthy response would be to that scenario with those positive characteristics in mind? And it might be that you'll want to write down in a journal, or you might want to just speak out loud and kind of do a role rehearsal kind of thing in your world. You might want to have somebody that you're accountable to, whether it's a therapist or a close friend, and say, the next time it happens, here's my game plan, and this is what I'm going to say. But you want to be very proactive in saying, this is my definition for who I am relative to these common scenarios. And so if you're able to do that over and over and over, and you make that an ongoing practice, and I do like the idea of you journaling it and writing it down, then it can become more and more first nature, so that when you're at the time where you really do need to establish who you are, your separate identity, then you've got something in your mind to draw upon. That's what we talk about when we talk about building your interior, as opposed to just reacting to what the exterior world is bringing. Okay, I'm actually leaving questions on the table here. When these came in, I knew, okay, these are some live wire questions. Now, those of you who are not familiar, go ahead and send the questions in, put them in the comment section, and that's how I pick up on them. And I go through every week, and I keep a list of questions that have come through, and I so appreciate you all entrusting me with your personal lives and all. And I just appreciate you letting me be on your journey with you. I know it's virtual, but at the same time, we are team healthy, and we are committed to DRC, dignity, respect, and civility. So stay with it, and then we'll pick up next week and add more to it. Real quickly, on my podcast, I've been doing some interviews with different people. I think you're going to like who we have coming up next Tuesday on the podcast. There's a fellow named David Zahl, Zahl. He has a really interesting book called Low Anthropology. And then I have some other individuals that are coming up. You're going to be real pleased at who we get on the podcast. And I'm also, if it's an interview, I'm putting some of the interviews up on the YouTube as well. You're going to be pleased as to who's coming up. I'll be giving you more on that as time goes on. Okay, guys, I want you to have a good rest of the week, and I will see you next time. Keep the questions coming in, and just know we're team healthy, and we're going to get through this together.